Steve, look out for him. Look out for Matty.
I know.
Yeah, he is.
Susan, how are you? It's good to see you.
Welcome to Congregation Lador Vador. I'm Rabbi Stephen Moskowitz, and I have the honor of serving this community now for over 25 years. And Congregation Lador Vador is pleased to be hosting this evening's dialogue and co-sponsor this program with the Institute of Politics and Global Affairs at Cornell University. We welcome members of the larger community who are joining us this evening in person and those who are joining us online. You are always welcome to attend our events. Let me highlight just one additional upcoming program. On Sunday, December 15th at 4 o'clock, our cantor will be joined for a concert of opera and song by cantor Katie Kaplan. This evening, we welcome Representatives Peter King and Steve Israel for a discussion about bipartisanship. So let me formally introduce our guests who served our Long Island community for so many years. Former Congressman Peter King, a Republican, served 14 terms in Congress from 1993 to 2021. During his years in Congress, Representative King earned the reputation of being an independent leader who always fought for his constituents, even if it meant bucking his own party. Congressman King served as chairman of the Homeland Security Committee and served on the Financial Services Committee and Foreign Affairs Committee. Former Congressman Steve Israel, a Democrat, served from 2001 to 2017 in Congress. He now directs the Nonpartisan Institute of Politics and Global Affairs at Cornell University. As a member of Congress, Representative Israel served as chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and Representative Israel is a regular political commentator on MSNBC, and his insights appear regularly in the New York Times, the Atlantic, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. Please join me in welcoming Congressman King and Israel to Congregation Lador Vador.
You left out the most important thing in my life. I own a bookstore in Oyster Bay.
Oh, I forgot. I'm sorry.
Yes,
Theodore's Books in Oyster Bay.
I got to sell books.
Please visit the bookstore. So thank you for agreeing to be here once again. We last sat together here almost nearly 3 years ago to the day to discuss this very same topic of bipartisanship. And much, this may be an understatement, much has happened since then, and much has changed. But let me begin where we left off 3 years ago. I was very impressed, and I remember distinctly something that both of you said at that time. You said that when both of you served in Congress, you would not campaign for the other's opponent. You would, of course, endorse the Democrat or the Republican, but you wouldn't actively campaign for the other's opponent. And so I want to ask you this year, would you be able to still hold to that practice if you were in Congress today? Would the Democrat and Republican parties of today allow you to do that? Representative King, would you like to go first?
It'd be difficult. First of all, let me tell you, I had a great time here 3 years ago, but I have one bad memory of that day. That was the day that Brian Kelly resigned as coach of Notre Dame football team. And I came here, it started like this: what's going to happen when I get to the temple? But thank God the temple brought back my good spirits, so thank you. And we're just glad we got rid of Kelly. But anyway, it'd be difficult. The lines have been drawn more than ever, and there's a lot of reasons for it. Social media, it's gerrymandering, the fact that generally you don't have to worry about being reelected in November. What you have to worry about is winning your party's primary. The fact that in many ways people demand bipartisanship, or they say they do, but then too many people who come out and vote in the primaries, the most energetic people in the party, want you to be a hardline partisan. So, for instance, anytime I would vote with Democrats, I got issues like gun control, I was a rhino. And I have people who, to this day, attack me on Facebook for different votes I took 10 years ago on gun regulation. But on the other hand, there's also Democrats never vote for me because of certain positions I took. So the days of looking at somebody's composite record and say, well, I disagree with them on this, I disagree with them on that, but we agree on this, and try to balance it out, it's hard to do that today because the combination of social media, cable TV, and just the tremendous amounts of money that are put in by the opposition to you. And it can be in a primary. You get a large fundraising group against you. It's going to pick out one. I use the example. The first time I saw this really switching was in 2014 with Eric Cantor, who was probably the most conservative leader the Republicans ever had until that time, even more so than Newt Gingrich, because Eric was a real ideological conservative. And he was the majority leader, probably would have been the next speaker. There was talk of him being the first Jewish president. He was really a national leader. And he lost the primary to an unknown guy based on some amendment he voted on in a committee involving immigration, which Laura Ingraham and others took out and made that the whole campaign against him. And they got a bunch of money to come in. Eric was positive he was going to win. He didn't take the primary that seriously. And he was actually in Washington having dinner that night of the primary, ended up losing by 12 points. And when people saw that on our side, they figure, wow, we can't deviate at all without risking a primary. And I would say, and Steve can speak to this more than I can, but I think when AOC beat Joe Crowley in 2018, no one saw that coming. That also sent a message to the Democrats. So it's hard to find people breaking with the party. I'll end up on this being critical of my party on this, and I agree with them 80, 90% of the time. But if you're a Republican today who criticizes what happened on January 6th, you're considered a traitor. Now, that's all changed. After January 6th, Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy, all of them saying it was wrong. Now, if you say that, you're considered a traitor to the party. And I'm sure Steve can think of some examples on the Democratic side, but I'm using that as the most recent example on the Republican side. And I'm not one of these persons who believes in self-flagellation. I can give you 1,000 examples why the Democrats are bad and 999 why the Republicans are.
I would not campaign against Peter King if I were still in Congress, but it would be harder than ever. It used to be not so hard. It would be harder than ever. There would be those pressures. I stayed out of most of the races in New York. Despite the fact that I once chaired the DCCC, I was not drawn into those races. As a moderate Democrat, I actually think we need more moderate Republicans in the United States Congress and in the United States. And so maybe there's a moderate Republican, say Congressman Garbarino, for example. I hope this doesn't get him in trouble, but Congressman Garbarino, who represents the district that Peter had and some of the district that I used to have, a moderate Republican, I wouldn't wade into that district because I thought he did a good job and wouldn't endorse him because it would hurt him if I endorsed him. But stayed out. But to Peter's point, it is harder than ever structurally. On the issue of redistricting, that's the villain here, folks. When I was elected to Congress, there were about 100, 125 purple districts where you had to get along with the other side. Today, there are 25. 25. And that's all because redistricting is designed just to protect incumbents. And if you're protecting incumbents, you're drawing districts packed with as many Democrats for a Democratic incumbent and as many Republicans for a Republican incumbent, which is why most districts are now, ruby red or bright blue. And you get punished if you compromise. I'm thinking of, I'm recalling that I was under a lot of pressure from one of your opponents, I remember, several years ago, and they were the left in my district protested my district office because I wouldn't endorse Peter's opponent, and because I worked with him. What did we work together? What was our sin? It was working together to get relief, federal assistance for Sandy, and our picture was in Newsday. And that created a firestorm of, now I don't want to exaggerate, it wasn't a firestorm of protest. It was 4 people outside my office demanding to see me because I wouldn't endorse Peter's Democratic opponent. That energy now is not just 4 people, now it's a firestorm. Now you get punished for any kind of bipartisanship. If you cross the aisle, it's a sin. If you won't endorse somebody from the other party, you're going to pay a political price. And that's because of the new structural barriers to bipartisanship in Washington.
So you would potentially lose your seat for taking such a bipartisan position?
You anger your base.
I would say it's the biggest threat to losing your seat. And Steve and I, at first, also these different revelations you get. The other time was when we were talking to somebody who was involved in the redistricting. And basically, within 5 minutes, they could give you a district with X number of Jews, X number of blacks, X number of Irish, X number of Italians, female, male, whatever, all the age groups, and they could do that and put that together in a way that you couldn't lose if your life, if your life depended on it. And they could do it in like 10 minutes. I remember Charlie Rangel telling me the story. He had made some deal with Nelson Rockefeller back in 1970, whatever it was, on some housing bill. He supported Rockefeller's bill, or Rockefeller's priority. And they made a deal. Rockefeller said, I'm going to help you in the next time we redistrict. They were on the floor of Rockefeller's office with the Hagstroms and a magic marker, trying to find a district that would ensure Charlie being reelected. And today, some guy gets into a computer, I have no idea what they're doing, and suddenly you got a perfect district.
We had a great map. We actually worked, Rabbi, we worked on, we were looking together at maps. We wanted to cooperate. And finally, we made this deal. I would take every election district where there was a preponderance of mezuzahs, and you would take every election district where there was a preponderance of good pizza places. And that's how we would, that's how we would sort it out.
Can we go back to something you said earlier?
Sure.
That I want to. One of the things that's changed significantly in 3 years is, of course, January 6th, and you alluded to that. You said that a Republican can't criticize that. At least that's what I heard you say.
Yeah, no, I did. Yes, I said, yeah.
Can you clarify and add a little bit more about that?
Yeah, no, you'll be on Facebook, social media, you'll be attacked, and many Republicans and people close to President Trump. I mean, I have, but it comes back. We've had people who've been denied nomination who won't be considered for office because of that. And there's also, again, I'll let Steve speak, but there's also some of those red lines on the Democratic side, just certain stands you can't take. But there's also something which, I'm not trying to change the topic here, and I'm not trying to switch the emphasis, but the fact, I never thought I'd see the day when people would be reluctant to condemn anti-Semitism when it's there. And that really, to me, was seeing those demonstrations in Colombia and the pro-Hamas demonstrations. And it's not even, to me, I started off, I think, with like, my first district was like 16, 18% Jewish. By the time I think my last day had like 2% what I got. So it wasn't. So I support Israel for all different reasons. The main one being, to me, it's America's strongest ally, our most reliable ally, and it's our national interest to do it. But the fact that you would see such, and that's right, but I could honestly see somebody having a disagreement with Israeli policy, but it went so far, and I didn't have any, but I can understand that. But the tone it took, the anti-Semitic tone, I didn't think we'd see it. Not after the history of the last 100 years.
Yeah, I did want to actually move, because that's another thing that's obviously changed dramatically since we last sat here, and that is October 7th, which has shattered our world, our Jewish world, and certainly the lack of response in some corners, or the opposite response has just really, to say that it's hurt and it's been painful is a terrible understatement. And maybe you could speak to this, Steve, because that is what has emerged as a bit of a red line in the Democratic Party in terms of how supportive someone is of Israel. I mean, is Israel still the bipartisan issue it once was?
I see it differently.
Okay.
I don't see a red line in the Democratic Party on Israel. I see a handful of Democrats who were never supportive of Israel and still aren't supportive of Israel. I'm talking about House Democrats.
You don't think October 7th changed that? It just brought it to light.
No, and it exposed, there was tremendous energy on college campuses. And again, this is a Cornell University event. We had our protests. Somebody is in jail right now for threatening Jewish students, was arrested and went to jail. We lived it. I still talk to Jewish students. As recently as 3 weeks ago when I had a session with them. It was horrific at Cornell. It was horrific anywhere it happened. But in terms of the fundamentals, who is responsible for ensuring Israel's security and safety and survival? Members of Congress and the White House. In terms of what's happening there, no, I don't see a diminution of support for Israel whatsoever. The same few Democrats who criticized Israel before October 7th continue to criticize Israel now. But the votes on appropriations bill, this to me is a fascinating thing. This is where we're so animated by algorithms and social media and what we're hearing on cable news, whether you're watching MSNBC or Fox, that the facts are now clouded. And so I've heard that, for example, that the Democratic Biden administration has turned its back on Israel. Really? 2 carrier strike groups? Terminal high altitude THAADs, terminal high altitude defense systems, 100 American soldiers on the ground in Israel, training Israeli soldiers to launch those, the Patriots, the Arrow systems. Right. That's turning your back on Israel? There'd be no difference in my view between what the Biden administration did and what a Bush administration would have done, and for that matter, what a Trump administration would have done on the fundamentals of Israel. I've heard that Democrats in Congress have turned their backs on Israel. Really? Hundreds of billions of dollars in emergency appropriations going to Israel? Look at the votes. The same handful of misguided and fundamentally wrong members of Congress on my side of the aisle on that issue. It's the same numbers. So I would take respectful issue with that, with the characterization, or at least the interpretation, that Democrats in Congress and the administration are softer on Israel. I agree with Pete on the streets, yes. Yes, on the streets.
Also, I find there were less Democrats
and
speaking.
And not even Democrats.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I disagree with Steve to a degree. With the Biden administration, we can discuss whether they should have done more or less, but I would never say they're anti-Israel. But I think in the Democratic Party, there seemed to be a reluctance. I don't know of many Democratic politicians that went to Columbia to denounce what was happening. And I think in prior years they would have. So I think there's reluctance to take on the Muslim community, even though a lot of Muslims are not responsible for that. That's the way it was pitched, I think. So there was certainly more of a reluctance to condemn the overt anti-Semitism, anti-Israel that was going on. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely hear a more tentativeness about Israel and commitment to Israel on the left than I do on the right. And that's what I was, and that I think is, and perhaps you're right, October 7th highlighted it and brought it to life in the sense that, it was always there, but it wasn't loud and in our face. And now it is. But I appreciate the clarification. I agree. I mean, the Biden administration has certainly been supportive of Israel and defending Israel. So do you think people still believe in bipartisanship? I mean, is this still a value? Like the three of us do, I believe fundamentally in compromise. I believe in sitting across the table with people who I disagree with, because that's how I learned. I mean, that's what the Jewish tradition teaches. But do other people believe this anymore?
I would say less and less of the people who are active in politics believe that. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to go to the hardcore supporters of either party and go in and say a good word about a Democrat. They'll say, I agree with this, I disagree with that. You can't do that. You have to be down the line when you're appealing to your base. And in the past, they would always say, you run hard in the primary, then you work it out once you're elected. But it's hard to do it because it's an unending primary now. From the day you get elected, before you even take your oath of office, you're campaigning for re-election. And money is being raised for or against you, beginning the day after election. And the Democratic National Committee, Republican National Committees, they're already lining up candidates for the next race. And and you think of it, in the last election, I don't know, it was $1 billion. I have no idea how much was spent on all the congressional races. Without a doubt, an all-time record. When it was all said and done, there was a net loss of 2 seats by the Republicans. So all that money went into a net loss of 2 seats. And it could have easily been a net gain of 2 seats, either way. But I'm saying all that firepower, all that struggle that went on, what it did do, the lasting damage of that in those districts, is making it harder and harder to be bipartisan. Listen, Steve and I never saw the numbers. We probably disagreed 70% of the time on our voting records. Having said that, there was never an issue that we couldn't discuss. And whenever there was a possibility for compromise, we did it. And whenever we could work together, we would. That's another thing. Even if you agree on something, you're not supposed to work together with the other side now, because they're going to be in the same picture as you, or their name is going to be in the same press release, or on the evening news, the two of you are going to be seen in the same room. And that's, what the hell are you hanging around with him for? He's dangerous. Don't you know how bad he really is? And that type of.
How do you get things done then?
Well, we've not really. I mean, you look at it.
Well, take a look.
Yeah,
take a look. What gets done? Look, I think we've studied this at Cornell, and so what's behind the increasing unfavorable opinion of bipartisanship. Americans are less supportive of bipartisanship than they have been in a long time. So what's driving that? Several things. Number one, what Pete and I discussed, the fact that most districts are far left, far right, not in the middle. Secondly, it's malevolent, social media. Most people are getting their information, their news, based on algorithms that are created to do one thing, not inform, but to keep your eyes on it, to monetize it.
To reinforce.
To activate your amygdala. So our friend, Congressman Tom Davis from Virginia, who was my counterpart, he was the Republican campaign chairman, I was the Democratic campaign committee. He says most people get their news now not for information, but affirmation. And so if you're constantly being told that Democrats are on the lunatic left, by the way, not just told on social media, but President Trump's formal Thanksgiving Day message was, Happy Thanksgiving, even to the lunatic left that wants to destroy our country, don't worry, I'll save it from the left, right? That was his Thanksgiving Day post. But if you're only seeing that, and you're not seeing a different view, a varied view, why would you support bipartisanship? And the same for my party. If they're only, my mom, God bless her, she lives in Arizona, and she tells me, Pete, oh, did you read Democratic Underground, what they said? I'm like, I don't even know what that is.
What your mom
But
does.
it's a site that just is intended to incite Democrats to believe that Peter King is evil because he's a Republican. So you're getting it from social media.
And you said it was just evil, not because I'm Republican, I'm just evil.
Just evil. And then you're getting it on cable news. And I was on MSNBC, I was on the Ari Melber show 2 nights ago. I know when I'm on MSNBC, if I'm not a fire-breathing liberal, I may not be invited back. It's why I don't get invited back a lot, I suppose. When you go on Fox News, if you're not a fire-breathing Trumper or MAGA spokesperson, you're not getting invited back. So cable it's not news, it's a business model. One model is for the right, the other model is for the left, and the other model, kind of center-left, CNN, people watch when, God forbid, something horrible happens.
So the three of us believe that this is an important value. Bipartisanship, compromise, working together, learning. I believe that's how you learn and grow, if you sit talking to someone you disagree with. So do you have fixes? If this is a value we believe that people should have and adhere to?
I think be more willing to speak out. Also, I could just, that counts as Steve, to put, first, I would not have made the statement Trump did, but he was also called Hitler for the previous 3 weeks. So
He what? I'm sorry?
He was being called Hitler by the Democrats. So that's had an impact on him. Not that he needed much of an impact, but I'm just saying.
He is the president. There's a difference between some lunatics really calling him Hitler and the president of the United States saying Democrats.
No, but it was Biden and Harris both saying he was a fascist and comparing him to Hitler. So it goes back and forth. But all of us have to bring it down if we can. I don't know. It's
well, maybe just if I can focus.
Yeah.
Is there a solution for government leaders first of all, and then we could talk about individuals?
There are.
I would think if somehow a moratorium could be called for a year, and if they could sit down and find out what they can agree on and what they can honorably disagree on, and go forward with that for at least 6 months. I don't know if that can be done or not. I don't know.
Look, I think that the irony in all of this is that we're a very bipartisan country, or a very bipartisan population.
Yeah.
Right.
And look at the results of the last election.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
50-50.
Yeah.
Most Americans are right of center, left of center. It's just that there's no energy left of center, right of center. It's all on the far left, far right. And not just here. Look what happened in France today. Government collapsed. The center collapsed. Because a coalition of far right and far left came together and booted the prime minister. Look what's happening in South Korea this week. The center around the world is not holding. And so what do you do to reinforce the center? I think there are 2 things. One is there should just be redistricting reform. You shouldn't be allowed to draw districts to help an incumbent. You should draw districts in order, the way they were supposed to be drawn, to make sure every member of Congress represents roughly the same number of people. You know why Long Island has a fairly moderate congressional delegation? Because when we were there, a judge drew our districts. The legislature couldn't come to an agreement, right? The last round of redistricting went to the courts. And the judge was like, I don't care who's a Democrat, who's a Republican. I'm going to take Long Island, I'm going to put it into 4 quadrants. Each member is going to represent roughly the same number of people, and I'm not going to pack Democrats or Republicans. Purple districts. It's why we were a fairly moderate delegation. So we should not allow for partisan redistricting. And then the other thing, very controversial, I would restore the fairness doctrine in the media. We used to have a rule that if you present one view on the news, you have to present the opposite view. Now that rule was removed by 2 people, Ronald Reagan and Barack Obama. Reagan rescinded it. Barack Obama had an opportunity to restore it, and he didn't. And so I would just create more balance in the news and return it to information versus propaganda.
You're talking about making changes that people who have the power to do that would undermine their own positions, potentially.
Well, if I could make a partisan statement on a bipartisan issue, no, on the redistricting, the court did redraw the lines 2 years ago, but then the Democrats took over, and the Republicans picked up 4 seats.
That's right.
And then Democrats took over the legislature. We lost, I think, 3 of those 4 seats. Yeah.
You're exactly right.
So.
Is there something?
And by the way, Republicans would have done the same thing if we had a chance. I'm just saying that's the problem.
It's a weapon. A Sharpie is a bipartisan weapon. Both parties use it as weapons to punish the other party.
I mean, my worry is that the people who have the power to make that change don't have a vested interest to make that change. So go ahead.
So
clarify.
look, I think there is going to be corrective. There is a corrective, and correctives are elections. So, for my party, and I'm sure you've talked to your colleagues, I've talked to our former colleagues on both sides of the aisle. If Trump and Republicans in the House and Senate go too far over the next 2 years, there will be a corrective. And this is what happens. Midterm elections, only 4 times in history has the president's party gained seats in a midterm.
Right.
All the other times, the president's party loses seats or gets shellacked. If the Trump administration goes too far and House Republicans go too far and Senate Republicans go too far, the Democrats will take the House. I'm not sure the Democrats can win the Senate in 2 years, but I bet they can get it 2 years after that. And a Democrat could win the presidency. And by the way, final point on this, how do I know? This is exactly what happened in 2016. President Trump won, went too far. The House flipped, the Senate flipped to the Democrats, and then 2 years later, Joe Biden gets elected. Americans are in the center. They don't like extremes. The politicians may not solve the problem, but the voters may.
Also, when Obama got elected in 2008, then he lost
That's
60
right.
seats in 2010.
Exactly.
Right.
Bush won the 2004 election. He was on top of the world. Karl Rove wrote a book, How Republicans Can Never Lose Again, and we lost 35 seats or something 2 years later. So, it does go back and forth. And then Roosevelt, 1938, I guess, is a big example of that.
It's nice that you can both restore our faith in the system, that it will correct itself, that's built into
Well, it's not
it.
up to us.
No, yeah,
it's up to
I know,
voters.
but you're suggesting that the system will correct
Well, it
itself.
corrects itself, but when that happens, though, it also creates like a stalemate because you have 2 years of what they call extremism, whatever, and then 2 years of stopping it, but there's never enough to actually change it. So what you're doing is you're starting and stopping along the way.
Do you think there are things that individuals can do to help? If, again, this value of bipartisanship, this is, obviously we're in a synagogue and I speak about values, so how do we teach that? How do we relearn that? What can we do in our lives? Most of us are not politicians. So what can individuals do?
I'd say people in positions of leadership, whether it's in churches, temples, mosques, speak out, and not on issues per se, but just to calm things down, to say they have to be discussed in a rational way. And maybe, I think there is a place, I don't know who it would be, I don't know if there's an Abraham Lincoln out there today, but someone who could come forward, who has definite ideas, but is willing to work and say, let's find a way forward. But I don't know who it's going to be, and I don't know who has the guts to do it, but.
Yeah, look, I think it does rest with you, Rabbi. I agree with Peter. It represents with faith. It rests on faith leaders and business leaders who have no tolerance for going too far to the left or right, who understand we have to go forward. The center, is by its very nature moderate, and moderates aren't loud. By their very nature, moderates aren't loud. The extremes are loud. We need to find a way of rewarding folks in the center, from the bema or the pulpit or the C-suite, using whatever leadership we have to reward and reinforce the center. No, never pretend to be the smartest member of the House of Representatives. Competition wasn't always that stiff, with the exception of Peter King. But I know my history. Give me an example of any strong country or empire that survived when its center collapsed. Can't find one. When the center collapses, so does the strength of that country, civilization, or culture. We can't afford to allow that to happen. We've got to reinforce the center.
You spoke about social media too, in terms of the phone. Do you think there's correctives that can be legislated for that? I mean, Australia just made some rules about limiting social media for young kids.
Yeah, I don't know how enforceable that is. I'm fascinated to see. But one thing we could do is incentivize schools to teach social media literacy. You know, we used to have civics in schools.
Okay.
We hardly have civics now, but I think we should return to civics and modernize it to teach literally 4th and 5th graders social media literacy, to strengthen their critical thinking skills and carry that through 12th grade.
Yeah.
Also, you know, we're not that far distant from when you could do this. I mean, Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill were both praised and held as exemplars of bipartisanship, and they bragged about it. They were known for that.
Right.
And yet, he was the most conservative president. Tip O'Neill at that time was probably the most liberal speaker, and they found ways to agree and disagree, and agree when they could, and more often than not disagree, but do it in a way where they would, you know, make a big point of having the drink at the end of the day, and that set a tone. There was no real place in either side for coming out with firebrand type politics. And I'm going back, I guess, to 2011, Steve, when the Republicans shut down the government over the budget, I guess. This was in August of the year. And no, it was to extend the debt limit. And Republicans were going to let the country go bankrupt, theoretically, if there wasn't a deal. So anyway, Obama and Biden met. Obama and John Boehner, the House Speaker, met, and they had about 10 days of really intense negotiations. They worked out something. And I'm oversimplifying, but basically, Republicans have always said that we're never going to raise taxes. Democrats are never going to affect Social Security. What they're going to work out is that Republicans would allow some of the Bush tax cuts to expire, which would increase taxes, but we could say it was not a tax increase. And the Social Security, there'll be changes made to a future retirement age, which wouldn't affect anybody currently. And they agreed on it. By the time they got back, Boehner got back to his office, and Obama sat down in the Oval Office, the deal was dead. Rush Limbaugh was attacking it, and MSNBC was attacking from both sides. Yeah. Somebody leaked the whole thing out, and both, as I recall it, both Boehner and Obama denied there ever was a deal, but there was definitely a deal between the two of them, which would have been a classic Reagan Tip O'Neill deal.
There seem less examples of that.
No, there's none that I know of lately.
So what would you say? Go ahead.
Maybe you can think of something.
Well,
you want to say something?
Actually, so there's hope. When you think about it, in the last Congress, they avoided shutdowns. And nobody should be praised for avoiding a shutdown, but the bar is low. So what did Congress accomplish? They didn't do a shutdown. They didn't go over a fiscal cliff. They avoided existential crisis. How? Because Speaker Johnson, a Republican, and Hakeem Jeffries, a Democrat, cut the deal to get 218 plus votes to pass these things. This is my favorite. I watched Nancy Pelosi.
And there was a motion made to impeach Johnson after that.
And then there's a motion made to impeach him. But I used to love her or loathe her. I learned more about politics from Nancy Pelosi than any other human being. And she came to the bookstore to talk about her book. And I used to sit in her office when I chaired the committee. And Paul Ryan would call her when he was speaker, or John Boehner. And the conversations would go like this. Nance, my crazies are threatening to take me out, put us over a cliff, default on the debt, shut down the government. I don't have the votes. What can you do? I need some votes. And this is what she would say, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, X plus Y equals 218. In a synagogue, God is my witness. She would say, X plus Y equals 218. X is the number you can provide. Y is the number I will round up for you to get to 218, which is a majority. You need to pass something. But if I'm going to give you the Y, here's what I need to satisfy my caucus. This is what I need in the bill. And if the Speaker could do it, it was remarkable. I don't remember. I remember the speaker saying, whether it was Ryan or John Boehner, "Oh, that's going to be tough for me to sell. I don't know if I can do it." And so, instead of giving her all of the why, he'd give her a piece of it. That was done. Johnson's done a pretty good job of doing that, despite being punished. Now we'll see what happens going forward.
Well, what are your predictions in terms of the?
Also, let me give, and this is credit, and I don't want to be quoting anybody on it, and people close to Pelosi also told me how she controlled, she had some people she considered very crazy herself, and she kept them under control. And she was, I wish Republicans had been tougher with their people. I mean, it's like a compliment. She could be ruthless when she had to be with her own people, which to me was the job of a speaker.
Do you have a sense of how it's going to play out in the coming Congress?
I think if the Republicans don't overplay their hand, they can get things done. Actually, having Trump there will be able to control the House a lot more. If Johnson does make a deal, Trump will be able to enforce it, because he does have the Marjorie Taylor Greens and those people. Also, thank God Matt Gaetz is out of there. That's a step in the right direction. But I think also, again, I don't want to quote any Republican because they'd lose a primary. They get along very well with Hakeem Jeffries. Well, they think they can trust him anyway. So
are you suggesting that things will get done?
They could. I don't want to. If they can not overplay their hand, like when they talk about Elon Musk and cutting $2 trillion from the budget, you can't do that. There's money can be cut. There's waste that can always be taken out. It's not as big as people say it is. Right. And a lot of the programs that on their face look bad, and I'm sure make some cuts within those programs, also affect both needy people and also in many cases middle-income people who don't realize that they're beneficiaries. So, but it can be, I think, and I'm saying this as a Republican, I think they can do more by cutting back on some of the government regulations. That may increase jobs and revenues. There could be honest disagreement on that. But as far as coming in and say, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, it's not that easy. And it's not just a question of political courage. If you look at it, some cuts can be very dangerous, but others are long overdue. I hope they can do it intelligently.
I think it depends on what the what is. And so I think one of the existential issues we face is our debt and deficits. We will pay more interest on debt in the federal government than we're paying for our national defense in the next few years. That is dangerous. It's not sustainable. Right. And so both parties are going to have to figure that out. We're going to have to figure out where you can find some bipartisan courage to deal with restructuring our budgets and getting our debt under control and making investments, not just in the military, but investments in our schools, and in my view, investments in resilience for climate change, et cetera. So it really depends on what the what is. I think the big issue will be the Republicans, Johnson and Thune in the Senate, they're just going to have to navigate Trump. They're going to want deals. They're going to be regulated by that midterm environment. They don't want to go into the midterm environment crazy and chaotic. So they're going to have an incentive to do bipartisan stuff where they can. They're going to have to navigate the White House.
And I think
part of... But also Johnson and Thune will have to work out with Trump that he's not going to have his people opposing cooperative Republicans in primaries. And that's something they hold out there. So you have to get Trump to agree to that. I remember once during a NAFTA bill, Bill Clinton gave me a commitment that he would not oppose any Republican if the issue against him was NAFTA. Because that was,
wow.
Yeah. In fact, he got attacked for it, but he did it, yeah.
But I think part of our job is to praise compromise. Yeah. To say that's how the system works.
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
That's how it was designed. It's
yes, it was designed.
The Constitution.
But the environment that you described, social media, the cable news, it does the opposite. It's, compromise is a sin to your supporters, to your party, to your ideology. That it's about ideological purity and not about working together and compromise. And we have to figure out how we can better praise and hold up those examples when people work together. And people don't always get what they want, but each side gets something. That's the basic idea.
Exactly.
So I did want to take a few moments to open it up to the floor. We do have I'm going to ask people who have questions to please make it a question. And to use the microphone so that we can be sure to get the question on the live stream and heard on the live stream.
We ought to recognize the president of the American Jewish Committee is with us tonight, Arnie Herr is from Long Island, president of the American Jewish Committee.
Thank you. Great to have you. Who had a question? Just raise your hand. Go ahead.
Thank you, everyone. Steve, good seeing you. Peter, good seeing you again. Hi. Curious to get your thoughts on the effectiveness of the Problem Solver Caucus as one of the answers, and Problem Solver Caucus in the current Congress, and you see it having a continued role into the next Congress.
I'll go first, if that's okay, Peter.
Just explain a little bit
Yeah, so
more.
the Problem Solvers are a group, it's a bipartisan group. I don't recall what the number is now, but it's, I think, a few dozen Democrats and Republicans who call themselves the Problem Solvers Caucus. They meet on a weekly basis, or met on a weekly basis, to try and create a critical mass of people on both sides of the aisle that would vote together as much as possible on issues like immigration and entitlements, et cetera. Look, very simple. Any organization or group in Congress, caucus, conference, et cetera, that is going to put Democrats and Republicans in a room to get to know one another and talk about compromise and talking about giving some stuff up in order to move forward is a worthy organization. Now, whether they actually passed legislation or got stuff done, don't know. But the process where many members of Congress are being punished for talking to the other side, they see incentive in talking to the other side in order to keep the dialogue moving forward.
Yeah, I didn't join it, not for any opposition. I just, I would hope something like that could have an impact. I didn't see it having a real impact in previous Congresses, but there's no harm, and it could be a real positive going forward. A lot depends on the leadership of both parties, if they would encourage that, and maybe if they would together make a point of reaching out to the Problem Solvers Caucus, it would give them, or whatever group like that is set up, it would give them a stature that they don't have right now.
Bernie Sanders just brought up a bill to block $20 billion worth of sales. And a third of the Senate, of the Democratic senators, voted with him. I think there was only one Republican maybe that also joined them. How does that sit with your comment where you said, well, it's only a handful of Democrats that are anti-Israel?
Well, I was talking about specific votes on specific appropriations bills, on supplemental appropriations bills, where it was a handful in the House who opposed those bills, opposed the deployment of resources and assets. I haven't seen the Bernie Sanders bill. I would say that Bernie Sanders is one of those few who has been hostile to Israel. He was hostile before, he's hostile now. I've never agreed with Bernie Sanders on those issues. I've publicly criticized Bernie Sanders on those issues. That bill, I would imagine, has no chance of passing the United States Senate. It's a thing that people put their names on for, in my view, misguided reasons.
But I think it says something that that 1/3 thought it served a purpose to be on that, that's all. And believe me, we have the same thing on our side in different bills. On that, though, that was a message bill, and the message was that they were willing to put distance between themselves and Israel, which you wouldn't have had in previous years. Uh-oh.
Oh, now we're in trouble. Now, the Blumenfelds are bipartisan supporters and friends of King and Israel, so it's okay.
There was a bill passed in the House, which Mike Johnson sent to the Senate 2 months before election, that said any institution, learning institution that receives federal money that supports anti-Semitism will be defunded. The bill is still sitting in the Senate and has not been brought to the floor.
Yeah. That, you're talking about the specific language that it would endorse the IHRC definition of genocide and the Holocaust.
Correct.
And they're working right now to get that in the Defense Authorization Bill. Okay, so, but with all the respect in the world, Eddie, when Israel was attacked on October 7th, and Israel asked the Biden administration for hundreds of billions of dollars in emergency assistance, The Republicans in the House held it up for months. I'm not saying that this is not a what if.
But the opposite of that is that the Democrats didn't pass it a year and a half before.
No. I'm talking about October 7th, Ed.
They had a bill before them to give Israel some weapons and back that year or so before. But the majority leader in the Senate is holding up
But the
bill.
Republicans were in charge
And by
in
the way,
2020, in October 7th.
he's
during
part of the
Hamas
tribe.
massacre. Say again?
the majority, the speaker in the Senate is
Yeah.
is part of the tribe holding up the bill.
No, there is no speaker in the Senate. You're talking about the majority leader.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about the majority leader, Mr. Schumer.
Things, look, I support.
There's no camera that's going to take a picture, so we may not get it signed.
Oh, that's, I think, unfair, but okay. I respect you, not that view.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Arasich. I represent 65,000 skilled tradesmen and tradeswomen on Long Island. I want to thank both of you being in opposing parties for supporting labor for so many years, and thank you for your friendship. Now that the administration is going to change, the question we have here is, you know, with all of the input that we had from leadership on this side supporting the Democratic ticket, and then also looking at the winners, what do you think is the ultimate goal, or what do you think is the ultimate result in what will happen with the infrastructure? And I'll tell you why. We have $96 billion of economic activity coming to Long Island without the IRA and without housing and without transportation. Now that might be in jeopardy, but the one thing we're looking at is we say, as much as leadership may have been Democrat, the people who voted for you were Republican. So.
I think I follow your question. First of all, I think you may see surprising, I mean, Trump likes to shake things up. The fact that he had Sean O'Brien speak at the Republican National Convention. I think Trump wants to find ways to reach out to organized labor. If nothing else, just to shake things up. What I would be concerned about is when Elon Musk and others start to make cuts, they can say, all this infrastructure, who needs it? You know, Long Island has enough. That's the thing you have to look out for. And to other parts of the country, that can be looked upon as waste and fraud and abuse. And they say, oh, you union bosses, or on certain parts of the Republican Party, you can't be seen with a labor boss. I remember when Jim Hoffa went to the Republican convention in Philadelphia, he was ignored. And this time, the fact that Sean O'Brien came in was Trump sending a signal. How he follows through on it, I don't know. But I know when he got elected in 2016, early in 2017, he had like virtually every top hard hat building trades leader in the Oval Office, which Obama never did. And these guys are really, and that was a news story for about 8 hours until that night, Trump put out a statement saying 2 million illegal Mexicans came to California to vote against him, and that killed the whole story. And that was really the last move toward labor. But something like that, if he could play on that, we'll see. And they would shake Democrats up, and would also shake a lot of Republicans up. The Republicans not happy that the head of the Teamsters Union, because in their eyes, that's the symbol of all its evil, that he got a primetime speaking spot at the convention. So Trump is a wild card on this. So you guys may do well, or you may have to really count on some common sense Republicans to hold back some of these spending cuts that may target labor.
You know, you and I, Maddie, have had many conversations about infrastructure. This is the one area of I think, hope, based on the past, where you can get bipartisan agreement. It's the smartest investment we can make. There's a great book that I commend to your attention called Bold Endeavors by Felix Roden that makes the argument that across, what's that? Where's it sold? Theodore's books? No, actually, you can get it anywhere you want. But when you look at our history, every major period of economic decline, every single one, since the deficits and the debt that we had after the American Revolution, has been solved by one thing: building stuff, whether it was the Erie Canal or
WPA.
Our airports, the WPA, the Tennessee Valley Authority. Everything has been solved by investments in building. Now,
Well, you just say
even
highway
recently,
system under Eisenhower.
federal highway
Yeah.
system under Eisenhower. Even recently in the Biden administration, we had it was BIFRA, Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment Act. Put lots of money in the system for infrastructure. Forgive me for this, but I did find it interesting that many members of Congress on one side of the aisle voted against it and then put out press releases praising the project in their districts. I didn't know you can really get away with that, but you know, I guess in politics you have to have a high tolerance for hypocrisy. But that was an example of Republicans and Democrats actually working together to get it done. I really believe that, Trump is a builder, and I do see an opportunity, if he can tame his impulses, I see an opportunity for there to be a bipartisan focus on infrastructure. For my party, there's a political benefit. Our great failure is now we are viewed, if you look at the data, my party is viewed as the party of the rich, and Peter's party is viewed as the party of the working family, the working class.
Yeah.
That is
If you live long enough.
failure of my party to suddenly be viewed as the party of the elite.
Right.
And so I think we need to get back to building things, supporting building things, and supporting unions in building things in order to find our base again.
I would be very
Can I
encouraged.
say one thing, Rabbi? To prove the point that Steve made before though, about Long Island and downstate New York, Andrew Garbarino voted for that bill, and it was tremendously.
Got death threats.
And also Nicole Milioutakis in Staten Island. That's two downstate ethnic-type Republicans who identified with organized labor, and they were ostracized to a large extent by the rest of the party for that.
If you guys, if we solve traffic on Long Island, I would be. I think that we'd tons of votes.
Yeah,
It'd be
let's
wonderful.
not talk about congestion pricing right now.
Matt, I was going to say, Matty, you're stepping down soon, and really thank you for all your years of great leadership.
Yeah.
Representative King and Israel, thank you so much. This is just so refreshing. I can't begin to tell you amidst everything we've been through.
We're in a synagogue. This isn't the first time you've heard King of Israel.
It's wonderful. The war, the Gaza war, has been going on for 424 days. We were met with the terrible news this week about Omar Nutra. My question to you is, what advice do you have to help bring an end to the war and see the release of the hostages?
I have a rather hawkish view of this, honestly. I'm just a big believer in the fundamentals of put yourself in somebody else's shoes. If we had a terrorist organization, say in Mexico, that came across the border and invaded a community in Florida, there'd be no Mexico. We would have leveled the place. And if the terrorists in Mexico decided that they were going to arm themselves and their terrorists in schools and hospitals, we wouldn't allow those schools and hospitals to stay. And for Israel to be held to a double standard the way it has around the world, for the ICC to do an indictment, I know Bibi Netanyahu, Peter knows Bibi Netanyahu, I disagree fundamentally with him on many things, but to have an indictment of him as a war criminal when he's doing what any other responsible leader would do, and that is to dismantle a terrorist organization that massacred, raped, butchered, destroyed people, I think that's a horrific double standard. Now, having said that, I think that Israel now has. We had General Petraeus. We were here. General Petraeus was here, and we asked him a question about that, and he did say this, which I think is worth noting from a military history point of view. There's this thing called insurgent math, and so one of the things we're going to have to realize is that for every innocent Gazan that Israel kills, it's creating probably 6 new insurgents. People, these are human beings, they resent it, right? And they're indoctrinated, and they don't have to be indoctrinated. My mother didn't do anything wrong, she's dead, I'm coming after you. You're the enemy. And so Israel does need to find, it's not going to be able to dismantle every last member of Hamas. I don't even know what that means, right? But it is going to have to begin to come to a point, and it's going to happen in the Trump administration, where it believes it has achieved an equilibrium. It has achieved its most important strategic imperatives, and then figure out what the global solution is, whether it's having the Saudis come in or the Emirates come in, have other Arabs come in and rebuild Gaza. I've been to Gaza. Final point on this. The saddest thing in the world. That place, it could be a beautiful community. The problem is it spent all its time teaching kids how to blow things up instead of how to build businesses and resorts. And so you need a future for Gaza where the imperative is rebuilding this place, giving people jobs, making them feel like they have hope and investment in an economy, and not hopelessness. And that insurgent math is going to, Israel and the world is going to have to deal with that insurgent math.
What's unique about the Middle East, certainly with the Palestinians, is they have no leadership. I mean, we devastated Japan a lot worse than Israel is doing to Gaza. We devastated Germany in many ways, and yet they emerged with leaders who were able to bring their countries forward. I saw the situation in Northern Ireland. I was involved in that. They were fighting for years and years. They had leaders who were willing to stand up to the extremists, and they brought about an agreement after all these years with the assistance of the United States. Steve, I just don't know where they go in. I mean, I was there when Arafat and Rabin shook hands on the White House lawn. I know that in 2000, Bill Clinton's final months in office, he did everything, and he basically gave Arafat, Clinton and Barack basically gave Arafat more than he ever could have expected to get, and he never ever followed through. Sure. So they have to find leadership. I just, so until then, and it's no one. I mean, on the the West Bank or Palestinian West Bank, there they are. There's no. That's totally corrupt. I mean, Gaza, that whole Gaza area, that could be like the French Riviera. Right. I mean, if there was any type of honest leadership, and God knows the world is willing to invest, do whatever can be done, but you can't trust anyone there. I mean, that level of corruption and terrorism. So,
what do you think our role is as Americans and the American government in this? Is it just to support Israel in, or to offer advice? I mean,
no. Our long-term interest requires us to be engaged and invested in the Middle East. Is to look, Democrat. Agree with John. I think Donald Trump deserves credit for an amazing breakthrough, and that's the Abraham Accords, yes. Right? And so we need a foreign policy and a national security paradigm that energizes initiatives like that. I hope that we will expand the Abraham Accords. I hope that the Abraham Accords will result in a fundamental relook at Gaza. I mean, there's the Emirates. We know they know how to make money, so let them come into Gaza at some point and figure out how you stabilize and how you build. Ed Blumenfeld's going to build a Lifetime Fitness Center, and in Gaza City. There's lots of opportunities there, but we've got to be world leaders, not isolationists. Yes. We've got to be world leaders.
We have an investment in the Middle East. And now the Saudis, the ultimate, to me, they could really make a difference. They're the most amoral group I've ever, I mean, they would do anything. So they would sell their own people out to, if it means money, if it means prosperity. So if we can convince them that it's in their best interest to sign on to the Abraham Accords, then that would have a significant interest. And I think that was on the verge of happening. It was just one of the reasons why the October 7th attack came along. Yeah,
that's right. October 7th was triggered to stop the Saudis from signing the Abraham Accords. We can't let them get away with that.
So I just want to thank both of you again for coming to the synagogue and sharing with us your passion for bipartisanship. What? Okay. Okay. But I would like to can you just offer us each a closing word about a message about what we've talked about and something you'd like people to work on and think about?
One thing we can do individually, when you're meeting with someone from the other side who has different views from you, but you find something you agree on with them, give them credit for it, and that way we can at least start to mend fences. Also, to the extent you can, just at the dinner table or at work or wherever you happen to be, with people starting and try to just at least tone it down. Don't think you're going to convert anybody, bring them around, but at least calm it down and say, listen, this guy has a point, let's listen to him. Or if nothing else, it comes to me and Steve, they could be worse. Don't even say we're good, just say they could be worse. Let's vote them in. I mean, to me, we need guys like Ed Koch. You need people who are able to get things done. D'Amato and Moynihan were able to make things work. That was a different time. Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich got along after they had their 2 really bad years, and they got along. We got a balanced budget, we got welfare reform, and it was toned down. But we've gone, that seems like yesterday, but it really seems like light years away also at the same time.
Yeah, so I'll close with some recent experiences that I've had at the bookstore since the election. I stand at the store and people come in from both sides of the aisle wringing their hands, some with tears in their eyes. Are we going to survive? What's going to happen? I've had Republicans say, I voted for Trump. Is your party going to destroy democracy? I've heard this, and I've had Democrats say, will Trump destroy democracy? And what are we going to do? What should we do? And so my assistant Cornell, Emily, is here. She knows that I have learned, and I actually lecture on Stoicism at Cornell. I lecture on the principles of Stoicism. And so my advice to people, along the lines of what Peter said, is don't worry about what's out of your control. That's what Stoicism is. It's a waste of time. Don't worry about what's out of your control. What is in your control? What's in your control? This. Stop getting your news on this. I don't subscribe to the major newspapers anymore. What's in my control is I read The Economist and I watch BBC. Because there's no fires to be set in The Economist and BBC. I find
There's
that
no
that's
fires
where
here.
I get information. And to Peter's point, find somebody on the other side. You're going to learn something. Peter actually had the right number. He and I disagree on 70% of issues. The problem is that Republicans and Democrats are so busy beating each other up on the 70% that they're never going to agree to, that they forget that there's 30% that they can agree to. Just find the 30% with somebody.
And on that 30%, we would appear together at news conferences, let people know it. So that's created more of a tone.
Yes. Yeah.
It's
So
diminished
do
the
what's
impact of
in
the
your
70,
control.
yeah.
Buy Meditations by Marcus Aurelius at Theodore's Books, or read Epictetus, or read Seneca, read about Stoicism. It will buttress you, it will reinforce you, it will give you a sense of what you can do at this time to foster a change in the political dynamics that are buffeting America right now.
So first of all, I would like to thank both of you for coming to the synagogue again. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
And so, if I can just close with, I just want to mention a book. It's not at Theodore's Books, and that is the Talmud, which is it's a very big book, but it's the rabbinic book that talks about compromise. I mean, the whole book is built on compromise. That is the very value that it teaches more than anything else. There are rabbis who didn't even live in the same century who are on the same page, arguing with each other and sitting at the same table. So that's something that we really need to recover and to discover for ourselves, both in this country and in the Jewish community. And it's a value that we really need to hold up. So thank you for modeling it for us today. We really appreciate your time. Thank you again.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.